Good afternoon, good morning. I think I'm going to release these videos in the afternoon. I have a couple videos. As I'm recording this, this is 24 hours after the Supreme Court knocked down the Voting Rights Act, I believe, second part. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal person, so I'm not going to pretend to have the, I don't know, detailed information. I will be making a video. I'm going to be in the same outfit. I'm filming these back to back. But this first video have needed to make, I've wanted to make for over a week, is in regards to the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. I have a three-part section. I decided, at first I was going to try and make a short content video for each of the three major points I want to hit. But looking back, I think it's probably better for me to deliver this in this longer format and maybe chop that up into smaller pieces. So, a lot of fun going on with that Voting Rights Act in the mind. So, just to remind those of you who are watching, and the news changes so fast. Just under a week ago, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, a young man attempted to allegedly assassinate the president. Um, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I read through his manifesto all the way through. It sounds like his goal was to take as many people from the administration out as possible. I do not condone political violence in this manner, in this instance. I think this young man had mental issues. I think it's one of the dangers of speaking out politically. Who are you motivating and what are you motivating them to do? I think this person, felt like this was the only control they could take. And, now ruined, he's forever ruined his life over something that, from the weapons he had to the tactics he had, it was never going to happen the way he expected it to. And, he's going to spend the rest of his life probably behind bars, rightfully so, for what he did. So I just want to come off right off the back saying I don't condone violence politically. I think firearms should be used solely for self-defense, and anybody using it for offensive reasons is going to get the consequences that this shooter had. My big three takeaways is first focused on media, second focused on the gun control versus the ballroom default template responses by both people on the gun control left, and Donald Trump does nothing wrong, right, in regards to the ballroom. I also want to talk about, Trump assassinations attempts, and honestly why they're terrible. And lastly, which I will start with first, is the media making this about them. They can never, ever miss an opportunity to put themselves in the middle of something that was not targeting them, but, it's, God forbid it happens to them, because they are the, bastions of freedom, and they are doing this for the people. But, you know, anyway, I'll get to it. So, first, I'm going to focus on the media. So, what happened? The White House Correspondents' Dinner was starting, I don't know, getting started. And I think everybody who's looked into it could see that, shots were heard. There was immediate panic inside of the ballroom. And Trump and J.D. Vance and the administration officials were taken out by Secret Service. And you had pretty much a lot of people who were there at the dinner, whether they were media personnel or their guests, hunkered down. And eventually, I can say this stuff a week later. Eventually, the room was evacuated and the threat was neutralized. Some reports the shooter was killed. Some reports that they weren't. Blah 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 blah. The most frustrating thing as a normal person who engages and watches politics is seeing people who use their position to act as if they are a special class. You know, as a normal person, we are subject to violence, we're subject to prosecution, whatever, at the hands of our state. And, unless it's good for clicks, nobody's going to come to save us. We have to have our own resources, our own money, or we're begging our community for GoFundMe's to help, fund our medical treatment, to help provide food. But, for some reason, people in the media and government officials, love to say, I'm a senator, this shouldn't happen to me. Or, I just report the news, this shouldn't happen to me. Well, you're an American, you're a person who's existing within these borders. Whatever happens to us can happen to you, and whatever happens to you can happen to us. We've got to get the media away from thinking that there's some class above us just because of what they do. Another frustrating aspect of the media is immediately going to the talking point that we need to tone down the rhetoric because of this. I agree that the rhetoric needs to be toned down, but it's also important to call a spade a spade. And, I believe that this administration is a fascist and racist administration. That being the case, I still believe we have avenues that are peaceful to, not only get rid of this administration, but to also make sure that we do not have another fascist and racist administration in office. The racism aspect, I don't think we can legislate our way out of. The fascist aspect, we can legislate our way out of. I have a Substack essay coming out about this later, about why I think the Trump administration is fascist. We can strengthen our checks and balances to make sure that we don't have an authoritarian wannabe holding the title of executive. I think that's key. I think that's how we beat fascism. It's a multi-step process. The issue, starts at the local level, goes to the state level, ends up at the federal level. How do we combat, someone manipulating people to get a authoritarian wannabe in power who puts themselves above the state? So I will start off by saying that I think it's important to call a spade, and calling someone a fascist isn't a call to violence. It's speaking the truth and being honest. You also have commentary from people on the right saying, everybody who they don't like is a communist, or everybody who you don't like is a socialist. Again, I don't think that's a call to violence, but to pretend that it's okay for them to do it, but it's bad for the other side to do it is an issue. And the media taking the side of, I specifically saw Dana Bash ask, I believe he's Senator Jamie Raskin, might be a representative, to, do Democrats take some responsibility for, an assassin? That's not the media's job. Media should be reporting what's going on and, asking what are they doing to right the wrongs that are happening. If that's the aspect they want to take, if they want to do more than just report, they need to make sure that they are educating with actual factual information and not trying to pin the blame uh, on Democrats for people being frustrated and focused on what they can do to change this system. Uh, I'll talk about motives a little later. The next thing I want to talk about is the gun control aspect and the ballroom aspect. I will speak in depth on gun control, but also I'll just start with the ballroom first. The MAGA accounts that almost in unison started tweeting about the need for a ballroom. I don't think that was a message that was, put together. Let me also go back and say, I don't think this event was staged. I think it is much simpler to say that this person thought this was the only thing that they could do to change the country in the way that they wanted to see it changed. And it's, completely wrong, completely insane way to think about it. But I think it's much simpler for one person to think that than for this to be, a false flag event where some people all had to be in agreement. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pause. Okay, to pick up where I left off. So, MAGA, all these accounts pretty much, immediately put out a, red flag. This is why we need the ballroom. This is why we need the ballroom. The facts don't match up with that need. If the concern is the president's safety, you either A, cheapest solution, don't have the president do anything in public anymore. The alternative is to cancel, or no, so we have the situation where the ballroom basically could, the White House Correspondents' Dinner had 20,000 attendees, but the ballroom suggestion by Trump apparently can only hold 1,000 people. So, the event that the White House Correspondents' Dinner would not have taken place in the Trump White House ballroom, kind of as intended. So, this kind of BS immediate response to spend, legislation introduced by Lindsey Graham for $400 million to fund this ballroom is just, it's ultimately BS. It's one of those things that adds to the air of distrust by we the people. Why was that the immediate talking point of, hey, look at this tragedy that just happened? We don't have any information, but here, let's find a reason to spend taxpayer money on this thing that Trump really wants, which I think most of us can read between the line and understand that publicly it's being said the ballroom, but the real excuse is for what's being built underneath, which we don't know. Maybe we'll find out it's a bowling alley. Highly doubt it, but they're looking for whatever reason, an excuse to create the I don't know, that ballroom. So that just makes it kind of fishy, and why people are adding to the speculation that it's staged. The other side of the spectrum that I want to focus on is the gun control. People were immediately calling for gun control despite not knowing anything. And from what we can hear, and again, I'm talking about this a week later, the would be assassin was armed with a pump shotgun, a 38 caliber 1911 pistol, and bunch of knives. Those are pretty much everything the anti-gun community would say they are acceptable having. Pump action shotguns are not semi-automatic firearms. They require you to do an action to cycle a new round in. So they are, manual action firearm. And a 38 Special 1911 most likely could only hold, at max, if he had an extended magazine, maybe 10 rounds. But 38 Special is nowhere close to the 45. I'm a proud owner of a 1911 that's in, the perfect caliber of 45 ACP. And, my biggest magazine is 10 rounds. And the 45 packs a punch, but 38 Special is nowhere close. It still puts holes in people, but this immediate conversation for if a firearm was used in any capacity, then we need to use, gun control as our default response is frustrating as a person on the left because it doesn't sound genuine. I don't believe anybody who said that actually genuinely wants gun control. They just want to be seen as the person saying, we want gun control. We don't know what system would have worked to prevent this from happening. What we do know worked is Secret Service. This person, yes, they got close, but they were never a true threat to the president or the administration simply because they were stopped at the first security checkpoint. Yes, how do you get into the hotel? Blah, 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 whatever. the from what I understand, the metal detectors were the first line of defense, and it looked like in the video those were being put down. So the question is, you know, the system worked. The system, as soon as he met force, he was stopped. And so, ultimately, the gun control aspect of it just to me falls flat. What this incident showed is that, locked doors, armed security, protect protected and saved lives. We still don't know exactly what happened to the shotgun in the video. It appears he doesn't have a shotgun at the time that he encounters law enforcement. But, as a gun owner and person who wants to see a reduction in gun violence and deaths from firearms, what saved lives were armed Secret Service people who put up resistance to this person. You know, from what I understand so far at this moment, it seems like only 5 shots were fired, and all 5 shots appear to have come from Secret Service. So, maybe what stopped this guy was him tripping. That's still to be determined, but to automatically call for gun control just sounds like an auto, you know, response and automatic, AI response that, is this going to stop the next one? No. Is this going to stop this one? No. But it makes people feel good to be like, hey, I was the first one to call for gun control, or see, I've been calling for gun control the whole time. The last thing I want to talk about is assassinating Trump. You won't, a person will not get the outcome that they want by assassinating Donald Trump. It is my personal opinion that he would become a martyr if he is assassinated while in office. To get rid of MAGA, to see the end of, the fascism that we have rising in our country through MAGA. If MAGA stops fascism, the attempt on fascism isn't gonna stop. In my humble opinion, Trump either needs to pass away from natural causes or he needs to voluntarily leave office. Those are the only ways that we're going to stop Trump's policies and see an end to the fascist lean that we have at the moment. Assassinating him is going to allow people to put whatever their beliefs are and say he would have supported this. I think a recent example is Charlie Kirk. His passing, extremely wrong, extremely unfortunate, but his death allowed people to say, Charlie would have been for the Iran war. Charlie would have been against the Iran war. Charlie Kirk would have done this. He would have done that. Killing Donald Trump, a man who's held every position possible on the planet on anything, would allow MAGA to continue and fester into whatever monster it wants to be. And they might even create AI images of Trump saying, whatever stupid thing they believe. So, you know, just to wrap this up in conclusion, the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting was terrible. It was bad. I don't condone political violence, especially when there are peaceful and legal means to create the change that we need. And, the media needs to pull itself out and stop. The political elite need to stop pretending like there's some special class of people. We all could be victims of, violence, whether firearms are not involved. And, we have to take responsibility for making sure we're safe. And if you're surrounded by the Secret Service, they were probably in the safest room in the country at any given moment at that time. And to, be upset that people feel like this is staged or whatever, only because they were in the room, is frustrating. Just because you hold a title, you could get fired tomorrow and, you're one of us. And we all have to deal with violence. We all have to make plans and, unfortunately think about what happens next. What happens if I'm the one targeted? What if I'm in the room with someone who's targeted? Just because you're media doesn't make you special. Just because you're a senator or a government official doesn't make you special. Yeah, that's it. I was gonna do a Voting Rights Act video, but I don't have time. So hope you enjoy. I will have that video coming soon. Thank you. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, share. This channel is a conversation, and as I am just talking to myself in my basement, which I hopefully will have blurred out by now. I invite all comments. I don't think I'm 100% right. Tell me what I got wrong. Tell me what I got right, whatever. But I appreciate the interactions. Thank you.